Welcome into Football and Other F Words. My name is Zach Lyons. You can follow me on X/Twitter at FWordsPod. He's Mike Herndon. You can follow him on X/Twitter at Mike Herndon NFL. You can read both of our writings over at paulkaharski.com. Today, Mike is detailing how Sneed gives us clues or what to expect from the Denard Wilson defense now that we have a little bit of a clearer picture. Kind of ties in defensive backs, helping with defensive pressure and pass rush, if I'm not mistaken. It went live, so I'm only paraphrasing what PK said on the radio today. And then tomorrow I'll be writing about how do I think the Tennessee Titans think of the top three wide receivers versus Joe Alt, using some information and some data and some historical context. We got a lot to get to today. We're going to talk about L'Jarius Sneed. We're going to talk about athletic testing, JC Latham, and other things like that. And then also we're going to talk about our love for Malik Nabers, who maybe Chris Olave, I think, was the last guy that we both universally really, really loved coming out the draft. Wide receiver wise, I can't remember. Was there someone last year that I think we were split last year?
Yeah, we were split last year because no. We were both in on JSN, weren't we? You were.
Oh,
in
yeah,
on
it was JSN. That's who it was. It was JSN. Yeah, we were both in on JSN. So we got a new love. It's Malik Nabers, and I think there's a good chance that he takes him, but we'll get to all that later. First, Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Go join their newsletter. I believe on their website and Sinkers Beverages website. You should be able to find links and on their Twitter accounts to get into the NFL draft party that we are doing this year. We are doing 2 NFL draft parties. Thursday night and Friday night. Friday night is special though. Friday night, we may go live for like 5 minutes of putting our thoughts on there on whatever draft picks or moves the Tennessee Titans make on day 2 or night 2, I guess technically. But it's going to be mainly with a special guest, a private sit down. 11 of you are going to be able to sit down, and you guys are going, for the price of a ticket, you're going to have 5 bourbon tastings. For the price of the ticket, one of those bourbon tastings that you're going to have is actually more expensive than the ticket. So you're getting bourbon, food, expensive, really good bourbon, food, and special guest and one-on-one time with me, Braden, and a few others, and a special guest where you can ask anything off the record for the Tennessee Titans. So it's going to be some juicy, hot goss sesh. So make sure Bluegrass Beverages, Hendersonville, Tennessee, you join up and buy your tickets there. Mike, let's start off with L'Jarius Sneed. I feel like everything's probably been talked about that can be talked about the L'Jarius Sneed thing at this point on a Wednesday. But I want to hear your initial reaction, because there are some people out there who thought that the Tennessee Titans are taking too big of a risk. And even with a 2025 third round, some people are concerned about the knees. Some people are concerned about, what's next, about the money. And for everything that we have seen, the money looks pretty reasonable for, I think, what we both kind of believe is a top 5 corner, maybe even top 3.
Yeah, I view him as a top 5 corner, I would say. I think he's right in that range. And the paycheck is right in that range too, right? It's actually even a little bit low, I think, relative to that. I think he came in, tied for 6th or 7th in AAV, and then total guarantees, he's right around like 4th, I believe. If the total guarantees that have been reported are actually real once we see the actual contract details, which oftentimes that does not match up when you see it, because it could be guaranteed for injury but not for performance and things like that. So how much of those guarantees are actual guarantees remains to be seen. So I still think I'm kind of holding my holding judgment on the contract completely, besides the fact that I don't see any way that it's going to be a bad contract in my view, unless it's like one of these deals where, the one hold up and the one like potential wet blanket for the L'Jarius Sneed thing has nothing to do with the play on the field, has nothing to do with him off the field, has nothing to do with his demeanor, his approach to the game, how smart he is, whether he can fit in the defense that the Titans want to run. I think all of that is 100% seamless, enthusiastic yeses as far as him coming to the Titans and being an impact player. The one thing is the knee thing, and there's like the rumblings out there about, is it a degenerative issue or whatever, and we don't know what it is. Is this a thing that popped up heading into the Super Bowl against the Eagles? So just over a year ago, he pops up on the injury report in preparation for that Super Bowl. He plays in the Super Bowl. And then he goes through the offseason and he comes in and he misses a bunch of training camp and is kind of dealing with this swelling in his knee throughout the season. Now, I have no idea what the cause of it is. I don't think anybody has reported the actual injury or what it is. It's just a knee issue and it causes swelling. And for what it's worth, I mean, he's not a guy that's had any serious injury history at the NFL level. It's not like he's got multiple torn ACLs or anything like that in his background. So to me, and as Paul Koharski reported on the site this week, Chad Brinker, Rand Carthon asked around. They did due diligence. It sounded like the trainers for the Chiefs talked to the trainers for the Titans. And then obviously Sneed came in for a physical too. I'm sure they're comfortable with the knee holding up. And look, it's not like it has to hold up until he's 35 years old, right? Like it has to hold up for 2 years basically to make this work. And then if you get more than that, then that's gravy, to be honest. So like, I think this is a home run fit. I think the price that they got, the fact that they got him for a 2025 third is a huge deal because you preserve your obviously your picks this year. And I do feel like you can recoup a 2025 third sometime between now and then by trading back or, moving another player or something like that. There's ways to recoup that draft capital between now and then if that becomes important to you. But getting a 27-year-old shutdown corner who shadowed all of the good receivers for the Chiefs last year. So like if you in the article on paulkoharski.com, I've got the tweet in there that's got the rundown of all the receivers he faced, and then the numbers he put up against those receivers, like staggering how good he was last year. I mean, like basically 50% completion percentage for quarterbacks targeting those receivers.
Also, can I say something though? There are a couple of wide receivers in Mike Clay's tweet that I'm
like,
man, you really watered down his accomplishments.
He
like
unnecessarily reached on a couple of those. Yeah, Romeo Dobbs is in there.
No, that was
Jerry
one of them,
Jeudy, Josh Palmer. But then but the other ones like
Josh Palmer was funny.
Calvin Ridley, real one. DJ Moore, Garrett Wilson, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill twice, AJ Brown, Devontae Adams twice, Stephon Diggs twice, Jamar Chase. Those are real legitimate stud receivers. Brandon Ayuk. And he shadowed all of them. Andy Reid told Paul at the NFL, retreat or whatever that thing is, this week, hey, he was our lockdown guy. He was the guy we sent after the other team's best receiver. He laid it out as simple as that. So there's Chiefs fans out there that will try to tell you Trent McDuffie is actually their best corner. That is bullshit because they did not treat Trent McDuffie like he was their top corner. They treated Sneed like he was. And I think he performed like he was too. So they're getting an absolute stud. Like I am super excited to watch him play.
So now that I've let you, you're obviously super excited to let you talk.
I am
a fucking minute straight about
fired up about it. Yeah.
So I want to go back to the injury thing, because Chad Brinker, for those who do not know, or maybe have not paid attention to since he's been hired, has gone on and on about this mysterious injury algorithm analytics thing they have working behind the scenes. And he was interviewed by PK, and he talked about how you don't have to wait to gather information. You don't have to wait for the guy to come in for his physical to gather information on whether a player is healthy or not, or the extent of the injury and all this stuff. It's a very tight-knit community, I guess, behind the scenes, and everybody shares kind of information like that in the big scheme of things. And obviously, Kansas City allowed him to get a trade, to go seek a trade. So in turn, in facilitating a trade, you would also hand over, talk about any kind of information that you have as well. So this will be a good test to see, Cheeto was injured as well. So it's like a good test to see, like, what does this injury algorithm analytics thing do? What does it, actually predict? What does it talk about? So it'll be very interesting to see. I would assume it's like the chances of, you run this much, or you practice this much, or you do this many snaps, or cover this much ground, or something like that. Then it's like, okay, this increases your chances here and all that kind of stuff. I'm not worried about him missing training camp practices. If he only attends what he did last year, which was he only attended 7 of 19 training camp practices.
Yeah.
Okay, big whoop. I mean, maybe in a new system and a new team, you kind of want it.
The
But
new
again,
system
he
thing
is a
for
professional.
me.
And really, he's
Yes.
only been in the league for 4 years, which kind of is blowing my mind the more I think about it, because he is a little bit older. So we kind of have to start. That's going to be the case for teams or players looking for a second contract or whatever. In the fact that with NIL, players are traditionally now going to start being older. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, we don't really know anymore, because that's going to change the outlook of your age curves and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But in the big scheme of things, the Kansas City guys that talked about the knee kind of like talked about the knee as like a throwaway concern. Like the way Matt Verderam talked about it on that radio show that got everybody all a tizzy before our episode last week it was just kind of like, oh, then there's the injury. Oh, then there's the knee issue. It's like it wasn't that big of a deal. And I think that Colts fans and Kansas City fans, to cope with themselves, are making it a bigger deal now. But that they would have been fine with L'Jarius Sneed coming back and playing 17 games, including playoffs, at 100% snap rate. Everybody would. I mean, that's kind of where I'm at on that.
Yeah, and I kind of agree. Like, I mean, if it was really bad, we would see issues with performance, or him not being able to stay on the field. That has not been the case at all. So, yeah, to me, I'm not concerned about it until it causes him to miss games. If that starts to be a real issue, then I think that's when the alarm bells go off for me. But as of right now, it's not a big concern. It's something to keep in the back of your mind, but it's not, something to be hand-wringing over.
He's only missed 3 games his whole career, and one of those he was rested, right?
Right.
I mean, isn't that, if I'm not mistaken?
I think that's correct, yeah.
PK brought up penalties.
Yeah.
He had 18
that in the article
penalties.
too. Yeah.
6 were declined out of that 18, so 12. Those penalty yards those 12 penalties cost the team 97 yards total.
Yeah.
So that's 8 yards per penalty, if you want to say, because there's 5 DPIs, 3 defensive holdings, 2 illegal use of hands, 1 unnecessary roughness, and 1 illegal contact. So it's not all DPI. I mean, obviously DPI with 5, you'd like not to have 5, but there's other penalties mixed in there that
most of them are related to being
context.
Physical. Yeah. Which is his calling card, right? Like, he is extremely physical as a cover corner.
So to me, when you break it down, and you're talking about a guy that went from 2020, 4 penalties, 2021, the 4 penalties that counted, okay? 10 in 2021, 5 in 2022, 12 in 2023. So my estimation, based on the data, is that if it went 4 and 5 on even years, then in 2024 it should be 6. So I think we're okay. 6 penalties will count for the Tennessee Titans.
And here's the thing too with Sneed and the penalties. I understand the concern, and you certainly don't want him to commit penalties all the time. When it comes down to it, he guarded those receivers we just talked about just a minute ago, and he gave up an average of 25.3 yards per game on throws into his coverage. He gave up an average of 6 yards per game in penalties. So we'll tack that on, and we'll say he's going to allow Jamar Chase, A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson 31 yards per game. Sold. I will take it today. I don't give a shit how many of those yards are penalties versus catches. Give me that. Yeah, I'll take it. So I think there's some trade-off with that, but to me, it comes with the style that he plays, I think, to some degree, because he's ultra physical. And I think that, as I wrote about today on the site, marries perfectly with Denard Wilson's vision for what he wants the Titans to be. And every time he's talked publicly since being hired, it's been about attacking defense and not just not just meaning blitzing, but meaning the mindset and meaning the physicality and the fact that they are going to bring the fight to the offense. And if you watched L'Jarius Sneed play cornerback for even 1 second, that's the first thing that jumps out to you is like, oh my God, this guy brings the fight to the receiver every snap. Like he is a dog in coverage. And I am so excited to see that. And I think a Woozy fits that mold too. So like, I think between those two and McCreary, who really fits that mold too, you've got some like dogs at cornerback now that are not going to back down from anybody, that are going to play physical, aggressive football. They're going to contribute in run support. They can blitz. All three of them can blitz. That is a super, super strong point of the Titans roster now. And it's going to be a welcome change from what we've seen the last few years with the kind of more passive corners with Fulton and guys like that have passed through the doors. And even going back to a Dory Jackson and guys like that.
Hell, you go back to Jason McCourty the days. I mean, it's felt like it's been a very, very long time since we've seen here at Tennessee the press man coverage shadow.
Malcolm Butler,
whatever you want to call it. Yeah,
Malcolm Butler was the one
shadow. Yeah.
Well, he was the one who would give you that like physical press, like in your face kind of thing.
And that was a choice, right? Like they always gave them a choice to do
it. And Butler also, that came with a lot of gambling on his part. He just was not a very disciplined player. I don't think Sneed has that issue. Sneed is aggressive, but within a disciplined manner, and the same goes for a Woozy. So I think that group is going to be super fun to watch. And I think there's going to be games where those guys just blank out receivers. I mean, like, and again, as I mentioned in the piece too, that's going to help your pass rush. And I think you can make an argument that being able to disrupt timing in the route and make quarterbacks hold the ball longer is more valuable than one guy who can really like destroy off the edge, so like you still need that. I'm not saying you don't need a pass rusher now, but I think that this group is going to help that group so much as far as production.
Well, that's what I want to get into next, because if you really think about it, I brought this up on a football show, is like, isn't everybody's job or like responsibility a lot simpler right now? I mean, the way that they have constructed this defense, right? L'Jarius Sneed, your job is to cover up the wide receiver one. Cheeto, your job is to cover up the wide receiver two. McCreary, just stay in the slot. We're not going to move you outside unless your wide receiver goes with the outside, but that's where you're at. Amani Hooker, guess what? You don't have to worry about, Sean Murphy Bunting and Christian Fulton, Trey Avery, and Eric Garrer screwing up their assignments or passing off zones. Now you got three guys that can do all that kind of stuff. Jeffrey Simmons, you don't have to, you still want to get there in less than 2 seconds, but now your only wins are not going to come when you can only get there in less than 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Same with Harold Landry, who will be faster this year, should be better this year. And Kenneth Murray, it's like, see ball, get ball. They still have to have the green dot, but if they are, even though I'm very skeptical with my expectations for Kenneth Murray, and I think I have every right to be, if they have now surrounded L'Jarius Sneed, Cheeto, and you don't need him to be in pass coverage at this point. You can drop an Elijah Molden, Amani Hooker to cover up what he could still be there on third down, but he could be there on third down as a pass rusher.
And I do think, he's still going to cover some, right? Like he'll still cover some, but I think the other part of this is every time Denard Wilson has spoken, as I went back and listened to all this stuff to write about this in the article, he's also quickly listed Greg Williams and Todd Bowles as his mentors. And he's coached under other defensive coordinators. He's coached under Mike McDonald. He's coached under Steichen with the Eagles. So there's other guys that he has been under at times. Not Steichen, Gannon. I got my former Eagles coordinator switched. But the two that he goes back to every time are Todd Bowles and Greg Williams. And Todd Bowles and Greg Williams, their calling card, their hallmark of their defenses are that they're going to blitz a lot. I think Todd Bowles still sits around like a 40-something% blitz rate. And that's on every down, not just third down. So he's going to bring it at all times. And I think if you look at Kenneth Murray in the context of, okay, we're going to use him in this way. We're going to send him on the blitz. We're going to try to have him freed up to just chase quarterbacks, chase running backs. Like, you don't have to do a ton of thinking. You don't have to have a great feel in coverage for your hook curl zone drops. Like, you just go get the ball. I think that makes Kenneth Murray make more sense. I still think it's an overpay. I still think he's not, I'm still concerned about that signing, but it makes more sense why they were attracted to him for that role. Because, yeah, I do think he's big, he's strong, he's physical, and he's fast. And to me, it seems like that is all that they're going after right now is big, strong, physical, and fast. So it's
and that's all you can really bank on in the draft for linebacker or safety is big, strong, physical, fast. Because I caution people, there's very few that have the ability to come in and start right away and be like a Pro Bowler, All Pro, or even capable starter. They're all going to have their flaws in some way or another. There are guys that have less flaws for sure, but I mean that's what you're right. It doesn't matter really where you're looking at on this team. For once, they are saying we want bigger, stronger, faster, and they are giving us bigger, stronger, faster, right? Like that.
yeah.
I mean, even Calvin Ridley, Lloyd Cushenberry, bigger, stronger, faster. Like that's just what they're doing. And they're also building from the perimeter, right? We're not used to seeing that. It's been got to win in the trenches, got to build inside out. And they're saying no, because everybody passes the ball, and passing is success equals success, and stopping the pass also is equally as important as passing the ball. We are going to build from the perimeter, which is odd considering the way that the Golden State Warriors thing was taken to an extreme by many people. But this is really their building. Maybe Golden State Warriors isn't the best example right now, but it really feels like they're building perimeter inside. And I welcome the refreshing change of pace.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. And also, if you look at where Denard Wilson has had success, I mean, he's had success with veteran aggressive corners, right? I mean, like in Baltimore, they have Marlon Humphrey, they had Marcus Peters. They've got really talented corners there. In Philly, he had Slay and Bradbury. So I think it's, even going back to his days with the Rams, I remember, what was it? He had Jackrabbit on one side, and then it was what was the other guy's name? I wanted him on the Titans, like in 2017. Tremaine Johnson, Johnson, and like those guys were physical press corners. Like this is his style to a T. So like to me, while I was critical of them for not wanting to say publicly what the vision was earlier this offseason, it is crystal clear now what the vision is, and they're executing on the vision with every move that they make. I mean, every move that they make really falls in line with what they are saying they want to be, which is encouraging. I mean, it's also nice. I know it Braden thinks it gets overblown, but it's nice to have a coach that will actually say stuff to the media and not treat it like it's the nuclear codes. I don't care at the end of the day. And I said this when Vrabel was here, just win games and put out a compelling football product. That's your job. The media stuff is like a bonus thing. But if you're going to ask me which one I prefer, I certainly prefer Callahan, who actually will talk about like, yeah, we see Ridley playing the Jamar Chase role in this offense, and that's how we want to use him. Vrabel would have never, ever given up of information or said like,
Yeah.
this is how we envision him fitting. It would have been, well, we're going to get him in here and see where he can help the team the best, and that would have been all you would have got. So I enjoy the new coaching staff from that standpoint. It's much more interesting to hear them talk.
Yeah, I think it's very, like you said, it's very refreshing and everything. You know, what it does do for you for the Tennessee Titans is it does allow you to still focus on the holes that are on this roster in the draft instead of having to take a high pick for a cornerback. Now, you definitely still could, right? Like if Kool-Aid McKinstry falls at 38 and he's the best player on your board, you don't pass it up. I mean, right? There's no reason to really, truly pass that up. And on the other flip side of it, you look at day 3 guys like Jarvis Brownlee Jr., Chris Abrams-Drain, who they're bringing in for top 30 visits. Well, those guys still make sense in round 4, round 5, wherever it's at. So to me, I'm thinking, again, it's kind of like the Calvin Ridley thing. It changes everything about the draft, and it changes everything about your approach. And now I kind of feel like this, Mike, and this kind of takes us into maybe our Malik Nabers conversation. Maybe it doesn't. We'll see where it goes. But earlier, when the cornerback hole was gaping, right, it was like a huge hole at cornerback. I'm like, okay, well, you could probably wide receivers out at round 2. Well, now that it's filled, I'm like, okay, now wide receivers maybe back in play in round 2, depending on who's there, if the opportunity is right. But now it feels like wide receiver gets a slight bump above CB in the round 2 possibilities.
I would agree with that. I think so, because to me, at corner, your starters are now set for 2 years. Yeah, like minimum. You were going to start Sneed, you were going to start Awuzie, and you were going to start McCreary for the next 2 years. Like, barring injury, those 3 are going to be your starters until 2026. Like, that's the next time you have an opening in the secondary or in the cornerback room, I should say, because you still have an opening at safety. But it's not a pressing need, although I will say the fourth cornerback is going to play, right? Like, so I don't think you can completely ignore it and say, well, we'll just put whoever in there. The fourth corner is going to play. These guys are going to miss time or, need to come out of the game for some reason. It's unlikely that you're going to see all 3 of those guys play like 98% of snaps. Although I'm pretty sure Sneed and McCreary and maybe even Awuzie played pretty much every snap for their respective teams last year. But regardless, usually the fourth cornerback does see the field. So I wouldn't completely scratch it off. And it's also Awuzie is 29. So you've got to kind of start thinking about having a succession plan in place for a couple years down the road, but it's not nearly as pressing now. But all the other positions still are, and I think wide receiver, and this has been a topic of conversation ever since the Ridley signing. Wide receiver, everyone's saying now, well, maybe they don't need a wide receiver. No, I think they still need a wide receiver because you don't rely anything on Burks or Phillips. Like, that's a bonus if one of those guys turns out to be anything for you. And then Hopkins, he's probably gone after this year. Like, this is probably Hopkins' last year in Tennessee, if I had to guess, right? Like, unless he just comes and balls out and is like another 1,000-yard year and, he just shows zero signs of falling off, despite the fact that he'll be 33 in 2025. That I just don't think that he's probably around beyond this next season. Like, do you think he's like, they can't plan for that anyways?
No. I look at it like this. So, and this is my opening paragraph to the article at parkarski.com, because this is kind of what we're talking about here. The Tennessee Titans are in a better place with their wide receiver room than years prior, maybe even the best, but they're not done. There's a difference between hope and expectation, and the Grand Canyon-sized gap between those two words is how to view Treylon Burks and Kyle Phillips as they both enter year 3.
That's a good
You
paragraph.
Yeah, you hope that both turn things around in various facets of their game, but the Titans should not have the expectation that they will, neither should fans, and neither of those players should preclude you, if the right opportunity presents itself, to draft a wide receiver, which brings us into the private workout or private meeting with Malik Nabers. Not a surprise. They met with him at the combine. Not a surprise. Malik Nabers will hopefully measure, and we'll test later today. He's supposed to do the 40 and obviously the drills. But the general consensus seems to be, much like the discussion around offensive tackle. Yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr. is the cleanest prospect at wide receiver, but just because you're the cleanest prospect doesn't necessarily mean you are the best prospect on some teams' boards. And I get the sneaking suspicion based on what we know that Rand Carthon, according to Derek Mason on 1025, Rand Carthon, he said he knows that Rand Carthon wanted Zay Flowers. We know that they have chosen in the Cincinnati Bengals Jamar Chase over Penei Sewell. We know that Brian Callahan and Rand Carthon have both said they want playmakers. We know that Brian Callahan has said, if all things are created equal, I'm taking the guy that scores touchdowns. So it is a good assumption that if it's Nabers and Alt at 7 sitting there, there is a good chance that those two guys are sitting there, that Nabers is not equal with Alt because he's higher than Alt. And I would venture to say that I think that all things equal, Nabers is number 1 on their board. That's even higher than Marvin Harrison Jr. That's kind of where I'm for this particular team. That's where I'm at on Malik Nabers and his fit with the Tennessee Titans. And I think that at the end of the day, that if it's Nabers on Alt, I love Alt, and I've been team Alt this whole time, and I have not wavered. But I've also been under the assumption Nabers isn't going to be there. So to me, I'm all in on some Nabers.
Yeah, I am as well. Look, I think for me, and I think I mentioned this on the show probably 3 or 4 weeks ago. I have toggled back and forth, and I think I finally landed on. I think Nabers to me is the best non-quarterback in the draft. Better than Marvin Harrison Jr., better than Joe Alt, better than any defensive player. I think he's the best player in the draft, and maybe the best prospect in the draft, period, even above the quarterbacks. I mean, the quarterbacks to me, you have to put in a different discussion because of the value and everything like that. But if you look at his profile and his tape come together, excuse me, together, it is a very, very rare talent at receiver that we're talking about. His yards per route run, his breakout age, the fact that he's only 21 years old right now, he is a superstar. Like, if you don't have to watch him very long to see, he has everything. And I get, like, Marvin Harrison is taller and looks more like your traditional, like, X type receiver, right? Nabers is still 6 foot, 200 pounds. It's not like he's a little guy. This is not a Zay Flowers.
He probably will come in at 5'11", don't you think?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, and I'm not going to split.
It's not that big of a deal, okay?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying that that's a big deal. I'm just, just throwing that out there.
But he is, I mean, we're not talking about a Zay Flowers kind of guy that's like 180 pounds, right? So I think that's one thing. But then you do have the explosive plays that he's able to create. You have the run after catch ability that is elite, and that is something that usually translates at the NFL level well for receivers. And then you have the body control. Like, he has top-notch body control, is able to make all the difficult contested catches despite not being as big of a guy. But like, I think body control to me over size makes a much bigger difference in whether you're able to make those contested catches. So to me, Nabers does everything for a wide receiver. He fits beautifully, and I think he's going to create more separation than either Odunze or Harrison at the NFL level, just because he has so much juice coming in and out of his breaks that I just think it's a different level with him, and I think he's going to be open and he's going to make a ton of plays at the NFL level.
Well, and I also think having Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins also changes the entire dynamic of even wanting Malik Nabers, right? Like I earlier in the year, I was like, team trade down. I think that I would rather have team trade down because I think I'd rather have Brian Thomas than Malik Nabers and a couple extra picks. And I may still lean that way, right? Like I may still, in the big scheme of things, lean that way. But Nabers is a guy that could play inside and out. Calvin Ridley is a guy that could play inside and out. DeAndre Hopkins could play the big slot and outside, obviously. But it also creates just a mismatch problem. Like a lot of people are projecting that in year 3, we finally see that, oh, well, Treylon Burks has been totally misused as a number 1 wide receiver or potential number 1 wide receiver. And now he's a number 3 wide receiver. And you're going backwards, right? Like now you're having to count on Treylon Burks to being a slot guy, yards after catch guy that can catch the ball and you can rely on. When you got Malik Nabers, who can actually take the different route, right? He can go, I'm a wide receiver 1, but I'm a slot guy that can get you the extra yards after catch. You can rely on me to be on my spot, be there quick, and I will catch the ball. And then when DeAndre Hopkins goes, I can move outside. Like to me, it's like I think that's the way that you would approach it if you were in the room, right? And everybody's in the room. We know that these discussions get intense, especially in the first overall pick. We know that there's varying opinions because there's different scouts, different general managers, and all this stuff with all their opinions. But at the end of the day, I feel like Malik Nabers is kind of out of the people that will be in the room. Because I hate to tell you guys, position coaches are rarely in the room, right? Like you already know what they want. They're rarely in the room. Maybe Bill Callahan is an exception, but I can't remember seeing Bill Callahan unless he was a head coach inside the room. I would assume that Nabers would be the presumptive easy pick at 7. Like I don't feel like there's going to be debate like there was last year between Zay Flowers and Peter Skoronski.
Yeah, and I do kind of also feel like I know people want need. They want to draft the need. They want to fix the left tackle spot, and I'm with you. Like I think all things being equal, I would prefer to have the left tackle too, just to get that fixed because I think it's a hard thing to fix. That being said, all things are not equal here. I think Nabers is a better player than Joe Alt. I think he's a better prospect, and so when it comes down to it, you're not going to look back in 3 years and regret, drafting Jamar Chase over like Taylor Decker, like because I've seen that comp for Joe Alt. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with it, but if Joe Alt turns into Taylor Decker, which is one of the outcomes that's possible, he's a good tackle. You can certainly win with him at left tackle, but if the Lions called up Detroit tomorrow and said, "Hey, we'll give you Taylor Decker for Jamar Chase," they would laugh their ass off, right? Like that's the point here. Like you've got to go get the best player that you can. If you're going to be taking somebody at 7, I mean, like this is the spot to go get the superstar, the guy that like you cannot trade for without giving up multiple ones. And I think that is Malik Nabers. It's not Joe Alt. Despite the fact that I'd be happy with Alt at 7. So I just think that if you're given the choice between the two, if all things were equal, I'd go with the tackle, but all things are not equal. I guess it's kind of where I come down on it.
Yeah, that I think that's how they view it too. Like I think you could say that Rome Odunze, Joe Alt are probably closer on their board than Nabers and Joe Alt.
Yeah,
I would venture to say that would be because there are rumblings from Tehran on his hit on Jared Stillman last week is like he doesn't feel that Rome Odunze is very high on their board. What does that mean? We don't really know, right? Like, does that mean he's just a third wide receiver? Does that mean that he's behind Joe Alt, or how far behind Joe Alt is he? He could still be ahead of Joe Alt. We don't really know what that means. A very nebulous statement that people have taken to be that they're completely out on Rome Odunze, which is unfathomable in my head that they'd be completely out on Rome Odunze. That would be bad GMing. If you are a team that's completely out on Rome Odunze, that is bad general managing. But we don't know what that means, right? So there is but I do think like it would be one of those things that would be like, take it to the bank. Malik Nabers is higher on their draft board than Joe Alt. Would you take that to the bank?
I think so. Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I'd cash that. And look, let me also mention regarding Neighbors and Harrison. If Marvin Harrison Jr. was named, Joe, Joe Harrison, would the question of Neighbors versus Harrison be as well? No, you can't have him over Harrison. Like, would that be the case? Because I don't think it would be. I think part of what we're talking about, because like even going back to high school recruiting grades, Neighbors carried a higher high school recruiting grade than Marvin Harrison Jr. did. And then they go to college and Neighbors outproduced Harrison. And I like, to me, I just think Neighbors is a better player than Harrison. And if his name wasn't Marvin Harrison Jr., we wouldn't be having this conversation because Neighbors would be the clear wide receiver 1 in this class. So I just think that there's some of that needs to be taken into account, that maybe that's being filtered into this conversation unfairly. But yeah, to me, I think they're going to be head over heels for Neighbors. And I think that's why they're taking them for, a private meeting and the pro day. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him come in for a 30 visit, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think if he's at 7, he's probably the pick. I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, and really, when you kind of look at their advanced metrics, like you look at Malik Nabers, better contested catch rate, right? Higher yards per route run.
Yeah.
Higher yards per reception versus man. Higher yards route run versus man. He has the better drop percentage, the lower drop percentage. He has the better. He's a little off on yards per reception. It's 18.1 versus 18. But his yards after catch per reception is better. His reception percentage is better. And then his average depth of target's a little bit lower. So, like, to me, Malik Nabers is, by all accounts, he had a better year last year. And maybe it's a little bit of the quarterback. I don't know where people fall on that. But for the most part, even when you talk about EPA, he's better and stuff like that. So, at the end of the day, I do feel like Malik Nabers is one of those guys where it's I would not be surprised if he is there and Joe Alt is there, they take Malik Nabers. I think the people who would be surprised or angry or upset, I think that they're very short-sighted in their thinking, because I do think there is opportunities in the second round to grab a left tackle or a right tackle, because both are equally important.
Yeah.
And there's still guys in free agency that can fill in for a year. And I get it. It's all about, gosh, aren't you tired of having a so-and-so guy at left tackle? And yes, I am. But I am also tired of the wide receiver sucking. Like, to me, that has been the biggest. We had a good run with Taylor Lewan, and we had a very short run with A.J. Brown.
Yeah.
Like, we had a lengthy run with Taylor Lewan, short run with A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown was clearly so important to this team's success that we are still talking about, and people still hold that trade over our head. No one's blaming, like, oh, well, crap, I can't believe they let Taylor Lewan retire. No, it's, I can't believe A.J. Brown got traded. And
exactly.
To me, that's kind of where I'm at on that. So it'll be interesting. That's kind of how I view it. The next thing I want to talk about, because this ties into our Joel conversation, a conversation that we have had many times on this show now. Probably this will be our third straight week, I think, referencing it. But the fact that Joe Alt, in his separation from the rest of the offensive tackles, where do you fall on Malik Nabers? And, like, because we've thought that offensive tackle 2, offensive tackle 3, and offensive tackle 4 are much closer to offensive tackle 1 in this draft.
Yeah.
You've had a couple of weeks to watch more Malik Nabers, to analyze more Malik Nabers. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr., let's just take him out. I think he's too much of a special case to include. Do you think the gap between Malik Nabers and Rome Odunze is bigger than the gap between Joe Alt and OT2, in your opinion? Whoever that may be.
For me, it is. Yeah, for me, it definitely
Okay.
is. And I do love Adunze. Like that's the thing. It's just that's how highly I think of Neighbors. So and to me, yeah, Neighbors is a very clear gap. And in all, like I think it's the best tackle, but I don't think it's nearly as like I still go back to like if Fashanu a hand size had measured differently, would people really be like crapping on him now? Because I feel like that's all being overblown. Because to me, like Fashanu was, by all accounts, either tackle 1 or 2. Like in fact, he was tackle 1 for most of the season in most people's mind, and then we got towards the end of the season, it became like Alt or Fashanu, and now it's like clearly Alt, and somehow Fashanu's like leftover lasagna or whatever over here. So I think Fashanu is still a much better prospect than what the discourse around him has turned into. And I don't know if that's just the hand size thing or if it's concerns over like the run blocking or whatever. But honestly, I just don't really give a shit about run blocking.
I'm with you.
That much. Give me the guy who can like dance on out at left tackle and lock down that side and protect your blind side so you can throw it all over the field. But yeah, I don't know. It's I think the gap between Alton Fashanu and even Fuanga and Latham is not that big. And I will say, I've said this earlier this week, Amarius Mims, if you could guarantee me his medicals were good, I might have him as my top tackle, to be honest with you. And I know that sample size is small, but that dude has very rare ability and traits. And I think if he can stay healthy, I think he actually ends up being the best tackle out of this class.
Mims is a great example of a player that should not have tested. And this, because to me, he didn't need to test. Like, we all knew that he was an athletic freak, right? Going into the combine, we all knew. And then he goes in and does the dumbass 40, which no offensive line, they should just do 10-yard splits or something. I don't even know if that will prevent the injury, but we got to remember, so many injuries that happened this year after like the first 40 or in the middle of the first 40. Don't do that anymore. And here's why. PFF.com, you referenced the article, but it's called Metrics That Matter from the Combine for Offensive Linemen. And they measured in wins above replacement over the first 3 years of the career. Athletic testing does not really mean as much. There are certain things that do, but does not mean as much as what people make it out to be. And before, you come at me with a Joe Goodberry whatever tweet that he said about Jackson Carman, because this is what he said. He said, will the Bengals continue to draft linemen that didn't do athletic testing before the draft? And this is, of course, in response to J.C. Latham, who weighed in his pro days and did not do pro day testing or combine testing. Cedric Ogabue, Billy Price, and Jackson Carman have me spooked. None of those guys are better prospects or were even considered in the same stratosphere as J.C. Latham. Like, that is the difference. And usually about this time, right? Pro day was a week ago today. So a week ago from Wednesday, March 27th. So March 20th. Usually by that time, you hear rumblings of teams or coaches being uneasy or concerned or annoyed about a player of this caliber not doing testing, right? Even with Marvin Harrison Jr., you had people get annoyed and start kind of talking bad about him. Maybe that's a little bit of smoke, try to get him knocked down the boards, but you heard it, right? But here's the thing, in the positional drills at both the combine and at the his pro day, he looked terrific. He looked nimble, he looked agile, he looked fast, and guess what? That shows up on tape too. Like, at some point, and you know me, I'm a big analytics guy. I use RAS in a lot of the stuff I do and all that kind of stuff. But we have always cautioned, RAS is just one piece of the pie. There are some positions that RAS is weighed heavily towards. There are some positions is not weighed heavily from. Like, for tight end, good correlation between success at RAS, success in the league. in offensive tackle, there's not that much. When you look at some of the top guys last year, like Christian Darrisaw, right? Christian Darrisaw, no combine, no pro day testing, still went first round. Pretty damn good,
Still
right?
awesome. Yeah.
Laramie Tunsil only did like 2 things. There were a couple of others. But the point is the idea that the analytics, if you're going to use the term analytics to say that RES or athletic testing matters at the position, then you're incorrect. It's a piece of the puzzle. You'd like to have someone more athletic. I mean, Trevor Penning is from 2014 to 2024, right? So this year, he is 6 or wait a minute, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5th most athletic lineman, Trevor Penning. Ezra Cleveland made it into the top 10. Brian Mahalik, if you guys know him, he's in the top 10. Matt Waletzko in the top 10. Tommy Doyle, Bernard Raymond, Blake Freeland, Mekhi Becton. These are not guys. Andre Dillard is on the first page of RAS with a 9.81. It is not a guarantee or indication of sustained long-term success. And people have to understand, if you're going to use analytics, actually dive into the analytics. Don't just say something off the cuff because you saw Joe Goodberry say something about Jackson fucking Carman, Cedric Obugie, and Billy Price. Like, I love Joe Goodberry, but that's not a take that you need to run with, saying that, oh, well, that means all offensive linemen who do not test suck. Because that's not the case.
Yeah, and I think that's the point is that those guys didn't fail because they're bad athletes necessarily. We don't know what kind of athletes they are. They fail because they're not good football players. And at the end of the day, it helps to be a good athlete, obviously. I think that goes without saying. But I don't think that there's any concerns with either Mims, or, who only ran the 40 because he pulled his hamstring, which I think the concern there is the fact that he pulled his hamstring after being hurt a lot at Georgia. So, like, the injury stuff, to me, real. And that's the reason I probably wouldn't touch him until, like, late in the first round, realistically. But with Latham, I've got no concerns looking at the tape. I'm not looking at the tape to seeing a guy that, like, ooh, I don't know if he can move. I don't know if he's got enough athletic ability to be able to block on the edge. Don't have that concern. Plus, he's, 6'6" and has 35-inch, pterodactyl arms, which, by the way, when you have that kind of physical size profile, like an Orlando Brown Jr., like a Trent Brown, which he's not even, like, as sloppily built as those guys. Because, like, if you look at J.C. Latham, he looks more like chiseled to me and like a tapered frame, like an athlete frame, than Trent Brown or Orlando Brown.
Moves. He's got some moves.
Yeah, he's got a little bit of that going on. But look, you can't put 342 just anywhere. It's got to show up somewhere. But to me, those guys did not test well. Those guys tested horrible. But you know why they win? Because they're extremely strong and they have extremely long arms. So they're able to just envelop these edge rushers, and they're quick enough, to get out of their set and protect. So to me, like J.C. Latham, I don't have any concerns on the tape. I don't have any concerns on his physical profile that I've seen. So, like, I don't feel the need to get number data to back up what my eyes are telling me. I would feel more concerned if it was like borderline, but I don't even feel like it's borderline. I feel like he clearly crosses the bar of, yes, this guy can play tackle at the NFL level.
The only test that has, to me, that you can use to find late round prospects would be the short shuttle, right? Well, that seems to be a good indicator of long-term success. And then the bench press apparently that's out of all the combine drills, okay, for offensive tackles. Bench press has the highest correlation to success in the NFL in wins above replacement, which is insane because everybody thinks the bench press is just the stupidest fucking thing ever. But that has the highest correlation. Laramie Tunsil, no 40-yard dash, no short shuttle, no broad jump, no RAS. Hold on. Ryan Ramczyk, just a bench press. We have Mike McGlinchey, who did just a bench press, vertical broad, no 40-yard dash, no agility testing. We have Rashid Walker from Penn State, did nothing. And I think I was looking for Rashawn Slater. I think I had Rashid Walker and Rashawn Slater. Evan Neal, maybe not the best guy to use, but he did nothing and still went in the first round. Christian Darisol did nothing. Paris Johnson just did bench and broad jump. Jawan Taylor just did bench. This happens all the time, people. This is not some new thing. And just because you're worried about his weight, and if you're comparing him to Isaiah Wilson and Mekhi Becton, then you're not watching the tape. And that you're telling on yourself. Yeah. That's exactly what you're doing. And that's unfortunate that you're telling on yourselves in such a public forum. But if you're comparing him to those two guys just because of athletic data, which, by the way, Becton was elite, Isaiah Wilson was average, he is a better prospect than both. So that right there should tell you athletic testing does not matter as much as what people want to make it out to be. Stable metrics matter. If you want to go into analytics, stable metrics matter. If you want to go, and what we've always said, tape matters more than analytics. We've said it over and over again. Tape matters, and there's a good chance, based on what we have seen, Daniel Jeremiah say, Dane Brugler say, Lance Zierlein say, other guys in the field say, J.C. Latham is in the possibility to go in the top 10. So he's not some guaranteed consensus offensive tackle 4 just because the NFL mock draft database has him as OT4, which, by the way, could include a big board for me. I'm not a guy that should be you should be taking their big boards to heart or anything, but they can include anybody's big board that makes one on any site. Same with the mock drafts. It's a flawed way to view it using it. It's an easy way. It's kind of like PFF grades. It's an easy thing to grab, to kind of reference, but it's not something that you should take to heart as what the team's opinions think. And from what we've heard from team's opinions, Joe Alt, Marvin Harrison Jr., on a lot of boards are not going to be OT1 and wide receiver 1.
100%. And one of the guys that I respect more than any, especially when it comes to offensive line evaluation, is Lance Zierlein, whose father was an offensive line coach. He has J.C. Latham as his tackle 1, and it's not really particularly close when you look at the grades that he has posted on NFL.com. So to me, that tells me that, yes, people are going to see this differently. And that's true almost across the board. We fall into this thing every single year, and I feel like we talk about it every single year, that we fall into this thing where it's like, okay, there's this consensus pecking order that it's like Harrison, then Nabers, then Odunze, then Thomas, and those have to be your top 4 in that order, and nobody could even think about switching up one over the other, or you're an idiot. Well, how could you possibly think that? We're doing the same thing with tackle. It's got to be like Alt, and then it's got to be Fuanga, then it's got to be Fashanu, or vice versa, whatever. But we get into this idea that, like, it's all going to be the same. It's going to be viewed the same by every team. And that, like, just because the Chargers, Jim Harbaugh's out there talking up, offensive line play this morning, which I agree with him. I think it was a great point that he made. But now everyone's saying, well, now he's definitely taking Joe Alt at 5. Who knows? Like, I don't even think Joe Alt necessarily is like a Harbaugh lineman. I think J.C. Latham is a Harbaugh lineman. I think he fits his mold to a T. Like, so I could absolutely see J.C. Latham being the pick at 5. Like, it would not shock me. It would not surprise me one bit. And I know some people would probably driving off the road, listening to this thing in the car or whatever. J.C. Latham at 5. But I think that's not, teams don't look at it the same. Like, the Titans aren't going to have the same board that the Jaguars are going to have, or that the Rams are going to have, or that the Seahawks are going to have. Like, they're all going to have them in different orders because they're all going to prefer different things. And these guys are close. Like, these guys are really good tackle prospects. These guys are really good receiver prospects. So it's going to come down to, like, the order is going to be based on preference, not based on, like, well, this guy is clearly much, much better at everything than the other guy. It's just not how it works.
Fully agree. I mean, at some point, people just, guys, you have to understand that at the end of the day, the mock drafts that you see, the consensus big boards that you see, always are wildly different than what really happens. The majority of them are wildly different than what really happens in the NFL draft night, what it happens in the thing. And so just because I look at it this way, I still don't have Latham as he is my personal OT4. Okay. I still go alt, and I got like Fuaga, and I go back and forth between Fuaga and Fashanu, and then it's Latham. Okay. So that's where I'm at. That's where I'm personally at. However, I would not
just for the record, I am alt Fashanu, Latham, which is really close between those two, and then Fuanga for me out of the top four.
So, like, to me, it's like, but those all guys are really close. So then you look at, okay, well, different teams have different needs. You can get a guy that's played right tackle for the last few seasons of college football if you're the Chargers, because you have Rashawn Slater. You put him over there, then you got bookend tackles. You got a guy that is a road grader that can do what you want to do, which is, guess what? Run the football. And they got that guy right there that can run the football, and he's familiar with right tackle. He's comfortable at right tackle. So I could see why a team would take Latham overall. I do not see why. Oh man, gosh, he is snoring as loud as hell.
They're working on gutters outside.
Oh, gotcha. I do not see why a team like the Tennessee Titans would have any of these guys, except for maybe Fashanu, over alt. So that's just kind of where I'm at. Like, different teams have different needs. Different teams view things and have different system fits. So to me, that's where I'm at right there. Is like, I understand that my top four may look wildly different than other top four, but I am under the impression and understand why other teams would have Latham over alt.
Yeah, and by the way, also the Chargers need a right tackle, and not that you couldn't flip alt to right tackle, but Latham has already played there and has shown he can play there, so that may factor into their thinking as well. But I also would like to say on the pod, Malik Nabers just jumped 42 inches at the LSU Pro Day, so there's that. There's that too.
There was also a 129-inch broad, so 10-foot 9-inch broad for you. So he was supposedly only going to do the 40, and now he's doing everything, which is, man, rest in peace, Roma Dunze as Titans wide receiver 1 and two-tone blue dude formula, because he's coming for it. And Malik Nabers is coming for that.
Yeah, 42-inch vertical is absurd.
Yeah. Now, let me say this. There's a lot of... I still think Troy Fontenot is in there as well. Fatani is in there as well. I think he's got the size that you want, the tenacity that you want. It may not be clean overall, but there's another guy that I really like. Again, all these guys are not that far off from Joe Alt, in my opinion. And I think you could do Fuaga at left tackle and be fine, because he's got that nastiness that you're looking for from a left tackle. Like Taylor Lewan, when you really think about it, his physical attributes weren't that great, right? I mean, he's got kind of small hands, he's got smaller arms, but he was athletic, and he was kind of a dirty player. I mean, in a good way, like how you want your left tackle to be. So I kind of see a lot of Fuaga to Lewan kind of comparisons in the sense of personality and size and athleticism. So like, I'd rather have a mean left tackle than a day 2 left tackle, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, and the sub 34-inch arms and all that, which Lewan had as well. Although Lewan's wingspan, I think was pretty strong, just because he's 6'7". I don't know. I mean, I honestly feel like there's those 5 tackles we just mentioned, including Fatanu, who I probably should include more in those discussions, because I do really like him, and I think he checks a lot of boxes better than really the...
Fuaga has a longer wingspan, by the way, than Taylor Lewan.
Oh, really? Okay, interesting. Well, I would say...
probably the hand difference because he has
Yeah,
10.125 hands and
Juan
Lawan
had little
had
baby hands.
like 9.25. So it's probably the hands. The
Yeah,
fingers got the wingspan there.
yeah, I can see that. I can see that. But yeah, I think Fatanu and even Mims. But like, if you walk away from the draft with one of those 5 or 6 guys, I think you feel pretty good about them being able to come in and start right away. Where I run into trouble, and this is part of the Neighbors discussion, although I don't think it should dictate the Neighbors discussion. Because again, at the end of the day, your sole focus with that first pick needs to be getting the best player that makes the biggest impact on your team. And I think Neighbors is that guy. However, if you wait to 38 to take a tackle, the like day one starting type guys to me are
Yeah.
gone. You've got, maybe a Jordan Morgan who,
And
I'm
what you
not
mean by that is like day one guys that need minimal practice. Like there's going to be
right.
day one guys that are going to have to learn on the job. They're learning
Yeah.
on the job day one guys in day two that could start for you day one, but they're going to be growing pains are going to be massive, which is
Yeah.
fine, sort of, but maybe that's not the best way. But Neighbors plus that alleviates a little bit of the growing pains as well.
Yeah. I mean, you're looking at like the Jordan Morgan, Kingsley Suamatia, Kieran Amagaji, um, Patrick Paul, those kind of guys in that range. And like, I'm not sold on any of them being like a really good day one starter. So, but again, you're not just drafting for 2024. You're not just drafting to maximize this season. You're drafting to maximize the next 4 or 5 seasons. So if you think Patrick Paul can be just as good as, say Olu Fashanu long term, then yeah, I'm totally fine. Even if it requires a little bit more work to get him there, right? Like I would rather have the rookie struggles, but then you have Malik Nabers and Patrick Paul. Then you end up with
Bolton,
Fashanu,
probably
but
like
then
Taj Washington, Malik Washington,
yeah,
someone
you end
that's
up
a
with
little bit more specified in their role that doesn't have the flexibility because you're
yeah,
likely. While I do think the wide receiver is a possibility in round 2, I don't think it's likely to happen. Like I think it's a
yeah.
little bit more improbable at this point.
They're going to have to draft defensive players at some point too, which I know goes against our general philosophy of just make the offense great. But they do have to draft some defensive players at some point because I think the number was since 2021 they've taken one defensive player in the top 200 in the draft, and that was Roger McCreary. So you probably do need to address that in a meaningful way. So I'm ready. I'm ready to see what they do, but like, yeah, the next 4 weeks? What are we? 4 weeks from the draft right now, roughly.
Yeah, so it
The
was a
next
month
4 weeks are
yesterday
going to crawl by,
or 2 days ago.
So
Oh yeah, definitely.
we're at the point now where like free agency has trickled into like you're going to get some nothing burger signings every now and then. Maybe the Titans. I still think the Titans will sign probably a safety and a tackle at the very minimum. But it's going to be pretty quiet from now into the draft. So I'm already anxious to see what they do, and we're not even out of March yet.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I like Malik Nabers. I like Joel. The Titans are in just a prime position not to fuck up
Yeah.
number 7. Like it's all
Yeah.
setting up to where unless they go and listen, I could be talked to in Dallas Turner. I would be very hesitant of it, but I could see the vision of why they would go Dallas Turner. Unless they go like Jordan Morgan, or Jackson Powers Johnson. I think the most probable situations are trade back, not in order. Trade back Malik Nabers, Joe Walt, Rome Odunze, I think are the most logical right there.
Yeah.
And I think that when you look at it that way, it's a win-win-win-win situation, right? I mean, if Malik Nabers and Joe Walt are gone and you're quote unquote stuck with Rome Odunze, there's a lot worse players you could be stuck with. If you trade back and then you still pick up like a J.C. Latham and a day 2 pick and this and that, okay, sure, I'm in. Let's roll. I think that's a great way to build the team. I think a good way to describe guys like Olu Fashanu, J.C. Latham in particular. I don't know if I'd really go this far with Fuaga, but it's something I heard the other day on the Athletic Football Show, that they are two guys that are red chip players, which I don't really like the term red chip. I think we need a color between blue and red, but they're red chip players with blue chip traits, and it's up to the team to get the blue chip traits out of them. And I think that's where, like, if you want to deem, and I do, Joe Walt a blue chip prospect because he's the cleanest prospect, he's the most complete prospect, I'm in. But these other guys are just right there behind him, and that's kind of where I put Dallas Turner. It's kind of where I put J.C. Latham, Olu, Roma Dunze. I go back and forth whether I want to include him as a blue chip or not. But I think that you're looking at a bunch of red chip players with blue chip qualities, and that's fine to get. Like, that is okay to get with this team. If you pick up an extra draft capital, if the draft doesn't fall your way, it's not the end of the world. And to have those kinds of players on your roster still. It's not like it's Joe Walt and everything else is the worst situation and worst possible outcome ever. That's alarmist behavior from people who are unserious.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let me ask you a question about, since you're a Bama guy, Chris Braswell.
Okay.
All right.
I like Chris Braswell number 2. So, like I said yesterday, if I could find the message I sent out, but I said I'm becoming increasingly ecstatic with the idea of Joe Walt in the first round and Chris Braswell in the second.
Yeah, that's kind of where
that's totally fine with that.
I started playing with the mock draft things, right? And I keep taking Chris Braswell in the second, and I mess around with it. You know, if Darius Robinson fell there, I would also be in on that. I don't think he's probably making it out of the first round. And then the other guy, I think it's a little bit of a reach maybe for him there, but Marshawn Nealon would be the other one that I'm kind of into for the Titans. I think all those guys fit.
I'm with you on that, because that's where I normally go. It's really hard to avoid Chris Braswell. Now, most of the time, Darius Robinson is there, and sometimes I cheat and take him, but I don't think Darius Robinson is going to be there. So that's where I kind of struggle. But for realistic purposes, I think that Chris Braswell and T'Vondre Sweat are perfectly fine really good number 38 picks, even if Sweat's a little bit of a reach. I am not as sold on someone as on Edgerrin Cooper at 38, but again, they've created this massive hole, so I would understand it, but I would not think that it's the best use of the resources. But to me, Chris Braswell, T'Vondre Sweat seem like the two guys that I kind of go back and forth the most, and barring a Darius Robinson drop, even over wide receivers like Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Legette, Troy Franklin, those guys, Ladd McConkey, those guys are there. I kind of still think that Chris Braswell is the best choice out of all of those guys too.
Yeah, that's kind of that's kind of where I've been leaning to recently, just because I do think they have a bigger need at edge than I think what a lot of people realize or
they've even
admit.
said it, right? Like they just said it this week. They said they don't even consider Rashad Weaver, Caleb Murphy as part of that edge room, apparently. You know, omission. Maybe it's by accident. But they said that Arden Key's situational, which is the correct view of it, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Like now we know for sure his best use is situational, because we kind of thought, well, maybe this will be a good chance. His career's on the rise. Maybe this is a good chance for him to be a full-time starter at that position, and he's not. And that's fine. There is still a role for a situational pass rusher on this team.
Yeah.
But they have said they need one or two more.
Yeah.
There you go. That should tell you everything you need to know about how they view edge and the position group that's currently on this roster.
And if you rank the most important positions on an NFL roster, obviously quarterback, we're setting aside for now. We know Levis is going to get his shot. We already talked about tackle and wide receiver. The next two positions are corner and edge rusher. And those are like your premium position. I think you could throw interior defensive lineman in there now, but you have Jeffrey Simmons. So you already have like a blue chipper in there. You don't necessarily have to have two. It would be nice, but I think edge and corner are the next two. So like I in corner, we already talked about, you don't really need a starter for 2 years. So it's going to be interesting to see. But like I think Braswell is a name that we should probably keep an eye on there at the top of the second round. And I still think like they've got to find more picks. Also, let me throw this out there. With Nabers, if you take Nabers at 7, you could trade Treylon Burks for a pick, right? Like, I don't know. I don't think you're going to get
Someone will take him, right?
a high pick, but you'd get a pick of some sort for him, I think.
Like kind of like a max, a 5th round pick, like at max at best. I don't think you're getting 4th. I don't think you're getting 3rd. I think at best you're getting a 5th, and that's still fine. A 5th round pick is very valuable in this draft. I don't care what anybody says about the NIL drying up day 3. It may dry up the 7th round this year, but who gives a shit? 5th round is still a really good spot to find quality players of need, whether that is a Jordan McGee out of Temple. That's where I target linebackers. 5th round is where I target linebackers.
Or if you want to go get your like blocking tight end, like Tip Ryman or somebody like that, like I'd be into that at that spot. So
that's just kind of where I'm at. And let's not. It kind of was looking a little bleak there about the possibility of a trade back because everybody's gonna be going to the Chargers or whatever, probably first, and Arizona, then the Chargers. I don't think the Giants. Maybe people are going to try and trade with them, but I kind of think they want to stick and pick at 6. But we'll see. But you got the Saints. You got Denver. They are kind of got situations where they could want players in that top 10 that could trade up. I'm kind of all in, like, if you're there in the 5th in getting those extra picks, I'm just not here on this idea that trading back is the end of the world because they get Joe Alt. Because there is a reality where Joe Alt's not that good. There is that possibility. He is not going to be, for sure, 100% a perennial All-Pro. He could just be, his ceiling could just end up being and seeing, I see a couple Pro Bowls every year, and I'm all right. I'm like, I'm average. Yeah. Or it could even be he just starts getting injured, right? I mean, like, there's no prospect in any draft that is for sure going to have an elite, unstoppable, undeniable career. Even Andrew Luck's career was ended short because of injury. Now, they got some good years on him, but they didn't get a fucking Super Bowl, right? Like, at the end of the day, injuries happen. At the end of the day, people don't live up to their expectations. At the end of the day, all this stuff it's a crapshoot. But you have to limit your risk. And sure, Alt limits the risk. Fully agree. Yeah, I mean, but also grabbing 2 or 3 players that are slightly below Alt sure limits a different set of risk parameters, right? Like, now you got 3 good players where maybe you only had 1 really great player, right? Yeah. So like, at the end of the day, that mitigates risk across the board.
Yeah, it's definitely spreading your opportunities for hits across
4.35 unofficial 40, by the way.
Oh, yes, Malik.
I'm telling you, there's a good chance that Marvin Harrison Jr. watch is on for the Titans at number 7. I do not understand this idea that he's not going to not be.
I mean, he could be there. I do think it's possible. I mean, look, I've talked about why I view Nabers as better than Marvin Harrison Jr., but if you don't think I'd be doing backflips if they got Marvin Harrison Jr. At 7, I would absolutely be over the moon about that too. So, I mean, there's a lot of good options. Just because I prefer one over the other doesn't mean I would be disappointed by any means, right? So, yeah, it's very interesting to kind of see how this all plays out now. But we don't know. Like, to your point, we don't know if Joe Alt's going to have want to do donuts on Charlotte Pike and have a crippling lean addiction and mumble rap career. Like, we just don't know what these guys have going on.
Yeah. That's what people just got to understand. We don't know what's going to happen, but it is very great. I'm excited to hear more about what comes out of Malik Nabers. All the measurements. Apparently, he is 6 foot flat, supposedly, according to Albert Breer. 199 pounds. We talked about the 42.5 vertical, the 129-inch broad jump, and now an unofficial 4.35 40 time. Whoo-wee. Talk about a guy that's improving his draft stock by right now. That's for sure. But I mean, all this again, all this shows up on tape. That will do it for us. Football and Other F Words, paulkarski.com, stackinginbox.com. Go to subscribe to both. Make sure that you're getting all the pre-draft analysis you can get. JC Latham will be the Film Friday by Stoney Keeley this week. So that will be a good one on Friday. So that'll be a good one for everybody to go watch and learn more about the worst tackle prospect in history because he decided not to test. Then go to Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Get you some good, high-quality liquor, alcohol, beer, wine. Does not matter. They have it all. THC drinks or CBD drinks, whatever you're supposed to like talk about those kind of drinks. They got all those there. And hey, guess what? Even if you are drinking some non-alcoholic beers, they got some unique ones over there as well. They got everything over Bluegrass Beverages. And make sure to join the Bluegrass newsletter to make sure that you go get the link and get you tickets. Limited tickets are in supply for day 2 of the event, which is the best event in Nashville going. So that will do it for us. He's Mike. I'm Zach. This has been Football and Other F Words, and you have just been effed.